Christmas and our Christmas Eve service. Okay, today, just want to welcome you to our very first Grumblers Anonymous meeting. My name is JJ Kiera, and I am a grumbler. It's true. Thank you. Some of you know what that's about. Yeah. Now, you might be wondering what you're doing here at Grumblers Anonymous. Like maybe there's some mistake, like you're not a grumbler like the rest of us. And it's okay to feel that way. It's a typical response. It's one that we've all felt before, and it's called denial. So we're glad that you are here with us. So with Thanksgiving coming up this week, we are reminded of the proper attitude of giving thanks for our family and our friends and our jobs and our kids and all our stuff that we have and things like that. Many of us even pray a prayer at Thanksgiving, sitting around the table on Thanksgiving Day. Maybe your family does that. Anybody's family do that? You gather before the meal and just have a time of prayer. Unfortunately, for some people, that's about as deep as it goes. And for others, it doesn't even go that deep because it's like the turkey is waiting, so finish up the prayer, Dad. Get on with it, be done with it. The food's getting cold. But we probably all agree that the idea of being thankful or grateful or content is an important one, right? It's part of what defines our faith, and it's one that we all try to adopt, especially this time of year. But there's another type of attitude where you naturally and instinctively take things for granted, where you complain and you grumble. How many of us sometimes drift into that state of mind? I'm honest, I'm raising my hand. See, at Grumblers Anonymous, the first step is admitting that you have a problem. So, let's look at what it means to grumble. And then you can decide whether you're a grumbler or not. So, to grumble means to show one's unhappiness or critical attitude. It means to make complaining remarks or noises under one's breath. It means to murmur or mutter in discontent, or to complain angrily or resentfully. I heard some ohs and oh me's in there, right? Let's talk about how to spot a grumbler. Here are 3 potential signs of a grumbler. First, a grumbler is not satisfied with what he has. If it's money, he never has enough. If it's his house, somebody else has a nicer one. If it's his iPhone 11, it's no good anymore because now the iPhone 12 is out. Right? It's like, what am I going to do with this old thing? It's 11. He has a degree in criticism and a PhD in nitpicking. Nothing is ever really enough. Second sign of a grumbler is that he always has an excuse. Oh, well, it's my spouse, or oh, it's the government, or I would help fix things, but they never ask me. Or I don't have the money, or I don't have the time. Or those people, they just need to. He loves to critique more than to solve problems, and he's really good at the blame game. The grumbler. The third potential sign is that a grumbler secretly believes that he can't succeed. Deep in his heart, the grumbler believes that the game of life is rigged, that the cards are stacked against him, that he's destined for failure even if he tries his hardest to succeed. He generally walks around with a negative, defeated attitude. If you show him a glass of water, that you put water halfway through and you say, is this glass half full or half empty? The grumbler would say, I can't really even tell, but I know that water is polluted. Something wrong with it. It's the grumbler. And the Bible has quite a bit to say about grumbling. Maybe the most obvious example is when the Israelites grumbled against Moses and against God in the wilderness. If you've ever read their story in the Old Testament from Exodus on, they grumbled because they didn't have enough water. They didn't like it in the wilderness. They thought Moses was a bad leader. They had missed Egypt, where they were in slavery, believe it or not. They wished that they were back there. And they weren't in the promised land yet. And they thought that God had let them down, when in fact, he had rescued them and he had a good plan for their future. If you fast forward to the New Testament, Another example is when Jesus, right before his final entry into Jerusalem, before he was crucified, he told a story. The story was about some workers who grumbled about being treated unfairly by their boss. So I'd like to spend our time together today looking at this parable from the book of Matthew. So if you have a Bible, you can turn to Matthew 20. We're going to be going through 1 through 16. It'll be on the screen as well. Reading from the NIV today. So let's look at this parable that Jesus told. This is one of the last things that he taught before that entry into Jerusalem in that final week. Verse 1, for the kingdom of heaven. This is how Jesus describes the kingdom in these stories. He's trying to give us a picture, even though we can't fully understand what the kingdom is. He paints these pictures for us. He says, for the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius, which was a day's wages. So just picture whatever you'd make in a day. For the day, and sent them into his vineyard. About 9 in the morning, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, you also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right. So they went. He went out again about noon and about 3 in the afternoon and did the same thing. About 5 in the afternoon, he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing? Verse 7, because no one has hired us, they answered. He said to them, you also go and work in my vineyard. So let's pause here for a minute, because it's important to note here that the workers in this story have nothing on their own. They have nothing. They have no job, and their outlook isn't very good until this landowner comes along. It's not like they had this big good job and the landowner comes along and tries to lure them away with the promise of more money or a bigger paycheck. They have no job, no money, no hope, nothing. And anything that they can get is really a blessing to them. So here's what we have so far in the story. You have a huge estate with a wealthy landowner. And then you have many unemployed workers who have a great need. There's actually 5 groups of workers in this story. And it can get lost in when we're reading it, but let's slow down and look at these. First, there's the early morning workers. This is probably 6 a.m. As he goes along, he kind of takes 3-hour increments, except for the 5 o'clock group. But we've got really early morning guys. And there's a lot of good to be said about these guys. They were up early. They're ready to work. They're hired first. They agreed to do a day's work for a decent wage, for a denarius, a day's wages. So then this second group is the 9 a.m. workers. There's more work to be done, and these guys were ready. They were willing. They were able, and they were offered the job, and the landowner offered to pay them whatever was fair. They weren't necessarily promised a denarius since the day was a little bit gone, but they were asked to trust the landowner's sense of fairness, that he'll give them a fair wage. Then we have the third group, the 12 noon workers, and they got that same fair wage deal that the 9 a.m. guys got. Then we have the fourth group, the 3 p.m. workers. They got the same deal. The odd thing about the fifth group, the 5 p.m. workers, is that they were hired at the end of the day and they only worked for 1 hour. The landowner offers them a job, but the text doesn't really say that they were offered any money at all. They don't know what the landowner's going to do. They probably figured that they really wouldn't get paid much because they were working starting so late in the day. So before we go any further, we can at least acknowledge this, that the landowner was full of grace. That seems to be a clear theme coming out here, that he could have ignored those that were hired later in the day. He didn't have to go back time and time again. His act of hiring so many workers was an act of grace. Let's continue on in verse 8. When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to the first. It seem a little bit backwards to anybody else? Pay the last ones first. The workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came and each received a denarius. They worked at 5, like an hour, and they received a full day's wages, in other words. Verse 10, so when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received a denarius. So we see here that when the day is done and the work's been completed and it's time to pay the workers, something kind of unusual happens. The landowner pays the workers beginning with the last ones hired and works his way down to the first. Now I can imagine if I was one of the 6 a.m. guys and I'm watching the 5 o'clock guys get a denarius, getting a whole day's pay, they probably thought that, well, maybe the landowner, he wants to give that little bit of money to those guys and then he's going to give the rest of it to us who worked all day. It's a lot of money to give for an hour of work. So I'm sure the 6 a.m. guys are thinking, man, if he's going to give them a whole denarius, if we're watching this happen, we worked all day. We worked like a 12-hour shift here. What is he going to give us? Like 12 days' wages? This is going to be great. This guy is amazing. Man, this is because, of course, he's going to give us more. But they'd agreed to work all day for 1 denarius, and that's what they got. So then the story continues, and we'll read it in a second, but I would imagine, at this point in the story, those guys would get their pay and say thank you and move on. Well, that's not really how the story goes. Verse 11. Speaking of the early guys, the guys that worked all day, when they received it, they began to grumble. Here's that word. They began to grumble against the landowner. Those who were hired last worked only 1 hour, they said, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day. So let me ask you, how would you feel about this? How would you feel if you were one of these early guys? Chances are that you and I would feel the same way that they did. And they began to grumble against the landowner. And the truth is, I totally understand their case. You work hard, you sacrifice, you get the job done, you keep your part of the bargain, and then some slacker rolls in the last minute and barely works and gets the same pay that you do. Man, just doesn't seem right. And I know they're grumbling, but let's face it, we probably would be too, wouldn't we? It seems wrong. So what's at the heart of their grumbling? What's at the heart? It's just a little phrase in verse 12 that kind of gives it away. When they said, you have made them equal to us. You have made them equal to us. It's not that these guys minded that the latecomers got paid. It's not really that they minded the latecomers getting a denarius. That's fine. But verse 10 says they expected to receive more. They expected to receive more because they felt like they deserved it. And that's why they grumbled. Their complaint, it really sounds good at first. It sounds like a righteous complaint. But it's based on the standard of human comparison. Ultimately, they weren't really complaining against the other workers. Their issue was with the landowner, but he was the one who hired them in the first place. Without them, they wouldn't have even had a job at all. And for the groups that were hired at 9 and at noon and at 3, he never promised to pay them more or less than anyone else. He just promised to give them a fair wage, which he did. So then the landowner responds, and this is such a great response in verse 13. But he answered one of them, I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? Are you envious because I'm generous? You know, it's hard not to feel bad for these workers because we've had things happen like this to us, right? You might find yourself secretly cheering for these workers and saying, yeah, stand up for your rights. Don't let the boss push you around. That's not fair. Our problem is that we root for the wrong side. Because We go out and we're ready to grab life by the horns, and we've got pure motives, and we're ready to take on the world. We work hard, and we give of ourselves, and we try to do our best, and then life gets hard, and the struggle is real. And things get bumpy and difficult. And then, just as life is really getting more and more difficult, somebody comes along and cruises past us at 80 miles an hour with no problems, with ease, and they just leave us in the dust. And so we grumble. Why do they have it so easy? Why hasn't the pandemic affected them like it's affected me? Why do they seem to be thriving and I'm barely surviving? God, what's going on here? But here's where we usually miss it. I have to see that my problem is with God. My problem isn't with people. My problem is with God. I'm mad at God because I think he was more kind or more generous to someone else than he was to me. Our problem isn't with those other people out there. Our problem is with God. The landowner said in verse 15, "Are you envious because I am generous?" When you finally boil it down, grumbling is really only a symptom. See, the root cause of our grumbling is envy. Root cause of our grumbling is envy, a belief that others are getting blessings that they don't deserve, and I'm not getting what I do deserve. Like they're blessed. Why are they getting a raise? Why did they get to keep their job? Why do they have such a nice house? Why do their kids not have problems? Why this? Why that? And I am not getting this. And I thought when I signed up to do this Christian thing, I thought it was going to be like God's going to just pour out blessing upon blessing and favor, and it's going to be easier for me. Well, it's easier for them, but not for me. It's frustrating. But in the story, we think that we are like the 6 a.m. workers who showed up early. And we worked hard all day. And we bore the stress and the burdens while others just stood idle until the last moment. And then they worked for an hour. We think that we are the 6 a.m. ones. But that's not how God sees it. God's view is like we are like the men who were idle all day until 5 o'clock and at the last second found work. For those workers, the reward is way more than it should be for the amount of work that they did. And so Jesus told this story to teach us something about the grace of God. We have to remember who we are in the story. We're not the 6 a.m. workers. We're the 5 o'clock workers who don't deserve what we've been given. And when we forget that, it's so easy to grumble. Because see, grumbling happens when we overestimate our own importance and underestimate the grace of God. Grumbling happens when we start thinking more of ourselves and less of the grace of God. You know what humility really is? Humility isn't beating yourself up or talking bad about yourself or always trying to be the lowest of the low. Humility is a proper understanding of who you are and how you fit in this world. It's a proper understanding that I am extremely valuable, that I am one of a kind, that I'm crafted in my mother's womb by a creator, and that God loves me so much that he would send his son to die for me. I'm extremely valuable and special and unique and all of that. However, I am not God's gift to man. That it's not about me. That God's plan is not centered on me. That I can choose to be a part of his plan. So I don't think too highly of myself. I don't overestimate my own importance. That I'm just one of many in a grand scheme of history. That as we exist even right now in this moment, in this special, incredible moment, that in the grand scheme of history, can we even measure it? Can we even measure this day in the grand scheme of history? So we have these two extremes that live in a tension, and we call that humility. So grumbling happens when we overestimate our own importance and underestimate the grace of God. In this story, talking about getting paid and wages and all that, it's not just telling us about our final eternal rewards in heaven. That's not what this is about. It's also shining a light on the posture of our hearts right now, our day-to-day walk with the Lord. Now, I'm promised a home in eternity because of my faith and my trust in Jesus, and that can be a settled deal. But I don't want to spend my whole journey getting there grumbling all the way there. I don't want to do that. Always checking to see how I'm doing compared to someone else, how they're doing. But if we decide to work as unto the Lord, to live as unto the Lord every day, every season, not out of envy or not out of comparison, we'll never be disappointed. We'll always see God's faithfulness. So what's the cure for a grumbling heart? Well, this passage suggests three things. Number one is to thank God for the blessings you have already experienced. The men who worked all day and felt cheated, they forgot that if the owner hadn't come along, they wouldn't have a job at all. How much better would it have been for them to say, thank you for the good things that you've given to me. Thank you for offering me this job and for paying me this fair wage. Thank you. But that's not what they did. Number two is don't judge yourself by the way God treats someone else. Don't judge yourself by the way God treats someone else. The problem is that the grumbler can't keep his eyes off other people. Looking at others always gets us in trouble. Remember, God isn't obligated to treat everyone alike. He isn't bound by our standards and our views of what fair is. If he chooses to bless someone more obviously than he's blessing me, that's his choice. That's his business. But a lot of people struggle with this because they think that because God did something for a friend or for a neighbor or for a loved one, that God must be bound to do the same thing for them. And although he can, it doesn't always work that way. God can deliver one of your family members from cancer and heal them and raise them up, and yet another family member can succumb to cancer and pass away. Even if we pray for both, God deals with us all differently according to his will. So the truth is that he might do exactly for you what he's done for someone else, or he might do something a little more, or maybe a little less. He might do something totally different altogether. He's God, and he can deal with us any way that he chooses, because he doesn't measure by our standards of fairness. I've wrestled with this in my own life. You've heard my stories of when I was younger and my arm was healed. I prayed in 8th grade and my arm was miraculously healed right in front of me. It was bent and it would not go straight, and I prayed and I felt a warm swirling inside my elbow and it went straight. I'm telling you, it was miraculous. It was incredible. And then fast forward many years later, this was not too long ago, maybe 4 years ago. I'm in the worst pain of my life with a back that has a herniated disc. And I'm in ministry, and I'm pastoring, and I love the Lord, and all these things, and I'm his servant, and all the, like, Lord, I sacrifice for you. I'm in ministry, I'm a pastor, and I'm praying for healing from my back, and no, didn't happen. And I'm like, God, I remember when I was in 8th grade, I barely had any kind of strong faith in you, and yet I prayed and you healed me, and now here I am trying to do your work, and you're not healing me, and I had to go through a surgery. Why? Why is it that when we pray for somebody, they get better, and then pray for somebody else and they don't, and we prayed with the same motives and the same heart? I don't know, because God has a different scale of how things work, and one day we'll understand that. But right now, it's a matter of trust. Some of you know what I'm talking about because you've been in pain, or you've lost somebody, or you've been through a divorce, or you're trusting the Lord when you don't understand. But if we don't do that, then things sour. Our heart sours and we start grumbling and complaining, and we just become bitter, and then everything becomes negative. And we still call ourselves Christians. We may even still come to church and do all the activities, but our heart is poisoned with grumbling, complaining, and with a lack of trust in the Lord. Number 3, remember that God rewards faithfulness more than production. We live in a world that puts a premium on production. The questions are, what's the bottom line? Or how many sales did you make this week? How many projects did you get done? How many degrees do you have? Hey, when are you getting that promotion? right? That's the way of our world. It's easy to bring that thinking over into our lives and into the Christian life, where we reduce our Christian life to this mechanical process that, well, if I have this much prayer and this much Bible study and this much work in the church, well, that equals this much reward. That God's obligated. That if I do all that, then he's going to give me all this. We're naturally production-oriented. And that's the way the world looks at things. You either produce at your job, or what happens? What happens? You're fired. You're fired. You're fired. Right? But God's point of view is different. The world evaluates production. The Lord evaluates faithfulness. The world asks the question, hey, what do you do? God asks, why do you do what you do? The world says, show me the results. And God says, show me your heart. Because remember, if you're a follower of Jesus at the end of your life, God is not going to ask you how much you accomplished. He's going to ask you if you were faithful with what he gave you. You don't have to be great. Did you know that? You don't have to be great. God is already great. He'll take care of the great part. You have to be faithful. I have to be faithful. See, where you stand with God is never determined by looking at others. Because Jesus said in that last verse of the passage that we're reading in Matthew 20, verse 16, he said, so the last will be first, and the first will be last. That means that some people who appear really important and that they have it all together here on earth, they won't seem that way in heaven. The people that are a really big deal, they won't seem like that in heaven. And some who they appear to have accomplished really little on earth, they're going to be honored in heaven. This parable teaches equality. Not equality of opportunity, but equality of faithfulness. You may have been given a lot. Well, were you faithful? Then you're rewarded. Well, you may have been given a little. Well, were you faithful? Then you are also rewarded. Faithfulness. Even if it's not that much, are you being faithful with what you have, with what God has given you? Because God measures quality so much more than quantity. He looks at our heart. So if you allow God to shape your heart on what it means to be thankful and ask him to give you his perspective, you can graduate from Grumblers Anonymous today. How about we make this Thanksgiving one where we stop comparing and we just appreciate what God has given to us, especially in a year like this, right? In a year that's been so difficult. And maybe that's one of the gifts of 2020. That we learn not to take things for granted, that we learn to cherish the grace and the blessings and the gifts of God that he's poured out on us. Because everything in this world is passing away. Everything is temporary. We never know what tomorrow holds. We're not promised tomorrow. So let's be extra grateful today. Let's live in gratitude of the faithfulness and of the goodness of God in all things. Paul said it like this. I want to close with just this passage. And you remember, Paul had been through so much suffering and persecution. He said, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. Whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I have I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. And then the famous verse, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. See, that verse has nothing to do with winning championships in sports. It has nothing to do with just being a better person. Paul said this in the context of, I can suffer or go through any difficulty. I can be persecuted. I can be in plenty or in want because I can do all things through the strength that Christ gives me. I can go through a pandemic. I can go through political chaos. I can go through a year that's been a mess. And I can be okay, and I can have the joy of the Lord. How, Paul? Because I have the strength of Christ inside of me. So I can have a rich, wonderful thanksgiving, even if it doesn't look the same or feel the same or have the same people involved. I can celebrate the goodness of God. So as we close today, we're going to watch a brief video. And then after the video, I'd like us to just take a minute and ask the Lord to open our eyes to see his grace in our lives. Let's watch the video.
Give thanks for the good days. When the traffic lights all turn green, when promotions come and bad habits are broken. Give thanks for warm meals and the company of friends. Give thanks for undeniable blessings and clear direction. When the music floods your soul and the worship songs flow without effort. Give thanks for coffee and clothing and hope that the two never mix. Give thanks for the mother who battles daily in prayer, for the father working 3 jobs, for the brothers and sisters who build blanket forts and read bedtime stories. Give thanks for sons and daughters and all our family who remind us of what truly matters. Give thanks for the stranger who holds the door open and the lifelong friend who holds you when life is broken. Give thanks for the hard days, for the phone call that brings life crashing down, for jobs lost and friendships fallen into conflict. Give thanks for the anger that reminds us we are human, and the tears that express more than words can ever fathom. Give thanks, though the pain is overwhelming, your energy spent, your spirit fallen, and your only option is to fall to your knees before your Holy Father and cry out, God, please help me. For in that moment, his power is made perfect. His love is made evident. He becomes your strength, your comfort, and your salvation. Give thanks for the power of redemption, from Genesis to Revelation, for the endless promises of a God who would rather sacrifice his son than give up on his children. For nail-pierced hands, for brilliant dawns, for the cool touch of rain and the simplicity of a quiet day. For all things great and small, let us give thanks.
Can we stand together? Close by just taking a moment with the Lord to ask for his perspective, that he would open our eyes to see the grace all around us, that we wouldn't be like those workers who thought that they deserved more, that we would realize our place in the story, and as we enter this week, that it wouldn't just be a brief time in our lives and then we move on, go back to how we were, but that there would be a course correction, there'd be an adjustment in our hearts, that just an overflow of grace and thankfulness, gratitude to the Lord. So take a minute in your own way, ask the Lord for his eyes to see. Think of your life. Think of what God has done. Maybe you're here today and you don't even know the Lord. You haven't developed a relationship with him. This is all kind of new. Well, zoom out of your life a little bit and look at what you've been through. I'm here to tell you that it's God who has spared you. It's God who has kept you because he has a plan for you, because he loves you. If you'll turn to him and surrender your heart to him, he will change you and he will cover you to where the burden won't have to be all on you anymore. You turn away from living for yourself and just being about yourself, and you'll be a giver. You'll be one who pours out for others. You can just call out to him right now. If you're joining us online, wherever you are, you can call out to him. He'll hear you. He's there with you in your house, wherever you are. And he loves you. So take a moment and reflect. Have a moment with the Lord to thank him. Good Father, we thank you. We thank you so much for your grace in our lives. We have way more than we deserve. We're like those workers who were desperate and had nothing, and out of your grace, you came and rescued us, and you've given us so much. Even in some of our pain and struggle, you have given us so much grace. I pray that we would have eyes to see that as we go through this Thanksgiving, as we gather with friends or family, or if we're just home by ourselves or with just a couple people, that somehow in the midst of all that, your presence and your glory and your grace would be revealed to us. We're grateful, God, for things like homes that we get to live in, for cars, for more than enough food, for computers and phones, for more clothes than we need, for heat. Thankful for family, for friends and co-workers, for grandparents and aunts and uncles. Thank you, God, for our parents. Many of us have lost parents. Thank you for them, Lord. For our children, as difficult as it is sometimes to raise children, thank you for our children. They are a gift from you. We pray a blessing over them, your favor and your covering over them, Lord. Thank you for new babies, for toddlers who yell and scream. Thank you for them, Lord. For good friends, people that we can call on, that we can be vulnerable with, that we can hug, we can cry with, that we can laugh with. These are gifts from you. So we bless your name. We honor you, Lord. Draw us closer together as we enter this season. And as 2020 comes to a close, show us, Lord, what you're doing. Give us the next step. We'll follow you. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for joining us today. I really hope that you can come next week, be a part of our new series called Rediscovering Christmas, and be a part of the Advent celebration where we'll be lighting a different candle every week, celebrating that theme as we await the coming of Jesus on Christmas. Have a great Thanksgiving. Be safe. Enjoy your family. And if you're meeting together with friends, just pray God's blessing over you. So may the Lord bless you and keep you, and make his face shine on you and be gracious to you and give you peace. May you go be a light in the darkness. Amen and amen. I love you. Have a great week. There'll be no groups this week, no Zoom Bible study, nothing like that. We'll just see you next Sunday. God bless.